everyone, and welcome back to the Nonprofits. So this article that I'm going to discuss now is titled Florida Students Now Need Parental Permission to Use Nicknames, Alternate Names Under New Ron DeSantis Rule. And this article comes from Virginia Chamlee of People magazine, and it was published on August 9th, 2023. And again, we're talking about what the Florida, because I live here, and as a Florida resident, mother of a non-binary person, and a queer and atheist activist, I don't really like this all that much. In fact, I don't like it one freaking bit. But if we're going to talk about bigoted crap infecting schools in Florida, I'm going to pass it to Jimmy, who has lived in Florida and feels my pain. So I would love to hear your opinion on this, Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Good to be with you again. And
I know.
Yeah, I made my way out of Florida. Sorry, I had to leave you behind. But I see just another another example of religion finding its way into public life by way of government and being disguised as parental rights when it's really just discrimination. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with a rule like this if there was something that actually needed to be addressed. For example, if there were a bunch of students that were calling themselves inappropriate things, and of course teachers would have to interact with parents about that. But I think just the of the Parental Rights and Education Act, or Don't Say Gay Bill, or however you want to phrase that. But we know that that was kind of a cover up to some other agenda, trying to take the power out of the teacher's hands to kind of do certain things in order to kind of inject this religious view. So really the teachers are the victims in the end. They have an inability to do their job and exercise their own judgment, probably afraid of getting in trouble with the school. They're just losing the freedom to educate while being surrounded by so much litigation, and it's all in the interest of a Christian agenda. So those are my initial thoughts there. What do you think about that, Aaron?
What is going on in Florida? I do not understand. I have very little understanding of what's going on in Florida. It confuses me a great deal. It seems like Florida is determined to become Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale, and this is just one little step at a time. It's just one little law at a time, one little anti-discrimination thing. I don't know what people are so upset about. Why would it matter what you're called, what people want to be called? How does that affect you? How does that impact you? What people want to be called, what their pronouns are. I would think I think education's a good thing. I think education's a great thing. Knowing about sexuality, knowing about your own sexuality. People are going to have sex. I don't know what Florida's so upset about. People in Florida are having sex. They should know about it. They should know, the ins and outs and the details. And I really don't think legislatures belong in schools like this. They need to be leaving it up to professional educators and people that study education, understand education, understand how to best to teach people the right environments. And legislatures, they don't do that. They're just interested in being elected and accruing power, not necessarily educating people the correct way. And it seems like they're using fear to guide them. And when you use fear to guide you, you're going to end up thinking that Zeus is out to get you every time there's a thunderstorm. And I think the underlying problem isn't necessarily the elected officials; it's the people that are electing them. You can't get in office unless you're elected, unless people are electing them. And so, if people want this to change, they're going to have to change the people they're voting for, and choose different people. Sure. Rob?
Well, first Florida had the Don't Say Gay law, and then it's been called the Don't Say Period law. Right now it's the Don't Say Nicknames law. So in my opinion, we need a bill in Florida to be passed by the governor so that everyone uses the governor's full name when they write it or say it, which is Ronald DeSantis. Of course, the name Ronald is most closely associated with a particular clown, and also, well, an ex-president. I also looked up the name Dion. So that's a term in geometry. It means one-dimensional polytope. I had never heard that word. I had to look that up. So, but first off, one-dimensional, all right? And a polytope means a geometric object with a flat face. So it means a one-dimensional flat thing, a flat-faced clown. I'll leave it there for anyone else to decide if that's a coincidence. Helen?
Well, I'm not going to argue with that assessment at all. He's one-dimensional, has no imagination, but that's just my opinion. So I would like to remind everyone that I live in a dystopia. So, welcome to my dystopia, everybody. Come join in. And it just seems that my state has to do a big fuck you to anyone that is not cis, white, male, and straight. It just seems to be the way that it's going, and it's really frustrating. And, I know DeSantis thinks I'm a liberal snowflake. I know he does. And I'm about to launch a freaking avalanche on him because this is ridiculous. And I want to point out, we know with people that we know personally and people that we hear about, that if you use someone's dead name, and they haven't legally changed their name yet, it can actually be traumatizing for trans kids and trans people not using the proper pronouns. And it's, even though somebody like a teacher or a person in authority might want to respect who they are as a person, they can't under this law. They have to call them by their dead name. They have to call them by other pronouns that don't identify with who they are. And that's a lack of respect for the person as a whole. And and just to add a little more layer to this, it adds into that speech policing. Like, freedom for speech for me, but not for thee. You don't get to choose, and and this makes me nervous. This makes me not feeling very good about where we're going. There's a lot of people in the state that don't agree with where it's going and fighting back. But we as Florida voters have a bigger fish to fry than worrying about pronouns. This is just another culture war thing that DeSantis is using to get his base up in an uproar, and then they will flock out to the voting polls. And if you are a person that doesn't want this to happen, go, maybe you should, do your duty as an American citizen to vote. That's just how I feel about it. I have more to say, but I'm going to pass it over to my friend Jimmy, so I can not yell into my microphone, because that would be uncomfortable for everybody.
Yeah. So I think Aaron, makes a great point. Society is ultimately responsible. It's easy to get caught up in this game of pointing fingers, right versus left, et cetera, but ultimately you have to kind of take responsibility for your involvement in the own society and who's kind of dictating the outcomes for you. So I think that was a really good point. And to Helen's point, becoming nervous about where we're going is a legitimate fear, and bringing up the point that people need to be respected is a concern that we should all, or a value I think that we should be instilling, especially in our youth. And I think that is really something that is being targeted. It's a way of kind of making an us versus them. I think that people who are in the LGBT community and transgender in general are going to lose that respect that we should all be kind of guaranteed. They're going to feel uncomfortable in their environment. And it really is evident that the legislators that are supporting something like this really don't care, because the trade-off is that they would lose power if they didn't go at this kind of easy, low-hanging fruit, right? This is something that people understand, right? This is something that you don't really have to explain. You can just say, hey, well, these people are wrong. And then you can convince a bunch of people to vote for you. It's a lot different than, I don't know, maybe taking on climate change or something that takes a relative amount of, I guess, having a vested interest. So I think that this trans agenda that people think is taking over schools is really being blown out of proportion and used it's being turned into a weapon. And then I think the second and third order effects of that are that the teachers are really the ones that have their hands tied behind their back. And it's unfortunate because they get paid very little and we ask them to do so much. So something to think about there. Just a couple other points I had. Aaron, what say you, sir?
I'm an engineer. I'd like to get to the root of our problem. And I'm sitting here thinking, trying to understand what problem are people trying to solve? And I personally don't see a problem, but the only thing I can think of is that people think that our society is going to collapse if people are transgender or gay or change their pronouns or change their names. And I just have to push back on that no, societies don't collapse because people are transgender or gay, because guess what? People have been transgender and gay all through human history. It is natural and normal. No, nope, I'm not. I'm laying the truth down. And so it's to me, it's a non-issue. And I want people to focus on things that are really affecting people, like climate change. I know we could also have another big discussion on whether some people are thinking climate change is real or not. Look at Maui. It's definitely real. Poverty. Why don't we solve some poverty? Why don't we improve the quality of our education instead of passing laws like this? I mean, the list can go on and on of the problems that we have. The money in politics. We could just go on and on. I think on real problems that are affecting our way of life in this country, rather than these non-issues. Because let's just let people be who they want to be. We would want that respect. These people that are passing laws, they want that respect. They want people to respect who they are. And so we just want that in return. Let's just respect people for who they want to be and who and what they identify as. Helen?
And I do want to point out, like, Jimmy, I'm sorry, you're James now under Florida law, because if Jimmy's your nickname, you're going to be a James. Sorry, them's the rules now. Because this is also a thing they included within this new ruling they wanted to pass, that if you haven't, like, if you're Samantha, you're going to be called Samantha, not a Sam. No matter what, even if you say, nope, I'm a Sam, not a Samantha, it's compelled speech to call them by that name. So this isn't even, I mean, like, yes, they had to do an umbrella thing. So not only, queer kids wouldn't be targeted, but it's also now extended into people that might not identify, it doesn't really matter if they identify queer or not. If you started calling me Eleanor, which is a variation of my name instead of Helen, I would get mad because that is not my name. And it just rings of disrespect to people, that just the average person that, like, nope, I am, I'm a Sam, not a Samantha. And it just really, really bothers me. Especially since we know better this, and I really like what you're saying, Jimmy, about the teachers, the really ones that are kind of getting the brunt of this, because I know even within my friendship group that are Florida teachers, and one of them happens to be queer, and one of them is very queer supporting, and they have to monitor their speech. And I have another friend who is a Spanish educator, and also has to monitor her speech. And this is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. We have such a fundamental problem with the education system that we really need to work towards that. And I know, Jimmy, I can see you're itching. So go ahead. Like, I see you itching, no, Jimmy. So go ahead.
I don't want to jump in and like talk over, but on that point that you just made, it prevents them from being queer supportive. It prevents them from having the authentic relationship with the students, right? And it crumbles the trust that teachers and students establish with one another, and what teachers are, it takes away from the way that teachers are able to motivate and kind of encourage children.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. And that's what's so frustrating, because you have to, like, I think we forget that, just like our jobs, kids spend a good portion of their day at school, and school should not only be a place where they're being educated, but also a place that's safe, that they're accepted for who they are, because that's the ultimate goal. We want to send our children out into the world being kind, decent people. And if we have all these weird subclasses, it doesn't teach them that. So it's gross, and it's not good if we want to move to a more equal society. So, Aaron, do you have another opinion you would like to give about being targeted, and us Florida people being targeted and have to do compelled speech because our governor sucks ass?
And well, don't forget the legislature.
And the legislature. It's a whole thing. Everybody's fucked up.
Yeah, governors and presidents, they get the most force. But guess what, people? Those aren't as important as your legislatures, the people that are making and passing laws. So if you're only showing up for your governor and presidential elections, you need to be showing up a little bit more. And how much you want to bet that this is going to be selectively enforced, right? When you think about it, nobody's going to stop calling people by their nicknames. If you're James and people call you Jimmy, people are going to keep calling you Jimmy. But if a trans student shows up and changes their name, then this law is going to highlight that. It's going to cause that person pain, and it's going to increase the persecution of that person, because it's just going to highlight that, oh, no, you changed your name. We can't change your name. You can't change your name. We have to call you by original name until you get parental support. That's just asking for teasing and tormenting and all sorts of ostracizing behavior by students and teachers. And this bill, its intent is to not do that, but that's how it's going to roll out. That's how it's going to be felt in schools and by students and teachers. Helen?
And I would have to imagine too that this might actually backfire, because, like, let's say you have a James that wants to be called a Jimmy, and then if he gets special privilege, that Jimmy, that they don't have to follow the rules, it will backfire, because someone could bring, like, hey, if we're going to be equal under this ruling, then you are not allowed to call a James a Jimmy. So it might backfire on them, which isn't great either. And I would really like it if it kind of did backfire on people, because it would be like, these are very hard things to uphold. They're doing these blank slate rules and legislation that keeps going in. And I want to put the emphasis, we talk a lot about Florida, but this is happening in other states as well. These draconian laws that are preventing people just to be who they are and live their life. We are at a point in our country where we keep othering people, which is not good. It's actually bad. And we talk a lot about Florida, because I do agree that, we are living in Satan's asshole, and everybody's getting attention. Everybody's paying attention to Florida right now. But this is happening all across the United States and other countries as well. We're Westerners, so we talk about the United States, but this is happening in other places as well, where people can't be themselves. And it's very frustrating to me, as, like, I'm glad my children are now out of school, because I don't know what I would do if I had a queer kid that was, like, in junior high or high school and going through, or if you're a teacher and having to deal with this crap. It's just ridiculous. So I am going to pass it to Jimmy to give us some. It's that way. This way. I'm going to pass it to Jimmy so he can give us some final thoughts, and then to Aaron, and then we can just, move on from this, because I feel it's kind of stinky.
Yeah. So with Aaron talking about, gays and transgender people have existed throughout history, I think that ties directly to the attempts to ban history books in Florida. I mean, I know that that is typically skewed in the past, has been typically skewed toward African American history. But in general, history books are targeted, and they can really tell people the truth or expose the truth about some of this controversial legislation. So that's important to keep in mind. And then just back on your point, we talked about climate change a little bit, and I'm not saying I agree with it or I disagree with it, or if it's right or wrong. You know what? You hit the nail on the head. We're not even having the conversation. That is that's a bigger ask from people. And I don't know why they don't just want to have the more important conversations. And then finally, I think it's very important to note that not only would I be James Jr., but actually I would be James III if we were really going to be correct. Okay. Because my grandfather was also James. So,
I'll get you
please
a
don't call
lordship
me
then.
James III. Respect my name, okay? And just call me Jimmy Jr. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, great segment. Good conversation. Aaron, what do you think?
Thank you, Mr. the Third. This is not legislating. This is persecution. And I want government that legislates, that solves problems, that gets things done, that isn't wasting people's time on persecuting people. It flat out, it's persecution, and it disgusts me. It should disgust everybody. It should disgust Christians. It should disgust everybody. And you need to make strongly worded phone calls to your legislators if you see this type of stuff going on, because there are more important things that affect people's lives than this stuff. Helen?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Rob, did you want to take us out?
Well, yeah, just to close it. I mean, I was kind of like joking about the Ronald part, but seriously, for some reason, he likes the name Ron, right? I don't see Ronald written on anything. It's Ron DeSantis. So really, by his own law, right, everyone would have to start calling him Ronald Dion. And by the way, I would be called Robert Palmer, and I purposely use Rob because there was a famous singer, a singer of note, simply irresistible and addicted to love, which I couldn't give my credit card to anyone with my full name on it and not have to get into a 5-minute conversation about Robert Palmer, the singer. So I'm sorry, I don't want to use my full name. It's Rob Palmer, and it is Ronald DeSantis.
Are you addicted to love, though, Rob?
Absolutely.
Are you addicted to love?
And simply irresistible. That's
so,
it. Thank you.
On that note, if you want to see more with the nonprofits, go to the doobly-doo above us and click and subscribe and do all the things.